Oh boy, is this year going to be fun or what for the Denver Broncos and the fans? Yeah, as we all know, AJ Bouye coming over from the Jacksonville Jaguars in a trade for a fourth round pick ends up being. Someone kind of said it ends up being kind of half a season of Emmanuel Sanders, because obviously they traded Sanders for a fourth round pick and they get AJ Bouye for the same. I think it's a really brilliant trade. As you go through Twitter, milehighreport.com, anywhere you find Broncos news, there's very little negative to be heard about this. AJ Bouye did not have a great 2019 season, but he's a very well-respected cornerback who's had a few really great years. He played really, really well in Houston. Jacksonville, not quite so much, but still a very high-quality player. And he's not too expensive. So he comes in at $13.5 million, while you're looking at somebody like Slay or Byron Jones coming in at 17. At least if you're extending Slay, Byron Jones coming in straight off at just probably some ridiculous number. Going to break the bank, going to break the market. Now, Bouye, there are a couple reasons to really love the signing. Number one is because there are just so many awesome plays on words that we can use for our headlines and for our articles. And that's what I'm all about. So anyone who can come in with an awesome name, please continue to do that. Drew Lock is like the best ever, and now Bouye is also fantastic. So Bouye, Grandma. What else is going on in the Broncos country? I mean, again, it's been a really great offseason, I think. I think there's a great energy. I think you really start to see that Vic Fangio is starting to put his fingerprints on this team. He's starting to feel more comfortable. Elway trusts him. Bouye was a guy that Fangio tried to get in Chicago. Now he's got him in Denver, and that speaks to something. And I think it speaks to one, that Bouye is obviously a guy that they wanted, and two, that Vic Fangio has a voice and that he is the guy now, and that's exactly obviously what you want. You have a settled coaching staff and you have a quarterback, and that is absolutely the first two steps to any successful NFL franchise. Now, especially when you have a quarterback who's affordable, that makes it so you can build around him. And I think this team, the more you look at them, the more you see they're very close to being right there in the contention window. They need to add a few pieces this offseason, and they need to make sure that, obviously you never know with injuries. Look what happened last year. You had James and Callahan out practically the entire season, and that did damage them. I mean, we will never know what that team could have been with those two. I mean, there were a couple really tight games, and the Broncos could have been 9-7 pretty easily, honestly, maybe even 10 wins with, a little healthier roster. Now, any team can probably say that, but that is how it goes. So I think that the Broncos this offseason are going to stay away from guys who are predictably injury prone, and they'll probably, again, as we've learned, Elway tends to learn his lesson. He tends to learn from his mistakes, and I think that the Broncos will find a way to not put themselves in a bad situation like they did last season with James and Callahan, who both were coming in off of injuries. And I apologize, I'm a little bit rambling today. I've had quite the week, just an unbelievable, crazy week. Started a new job, getting up, 5:30, 5:45 every morning, have a new baby, so my brain's not quite all there. I'm going to let Skipper Dude carry this show. He's got a really fantastic segment about where he sees the defense for the Broncos, where he thinks they're going to take things, what they should do, what they could do. He really kind of dives deep into each position on defense. Next week, he's going to dive into the offense, and highly, highly recommend, obviously, to stick along with the Skipper Dude as he describes his vision of this team. And one player that he didn't mention, he was talking about the defensive tackles, and again, that'll come up here in just a few minutes. I just saw actually on Twitter that Calais Campbell, I believe he must be a restricted free agent in Jacksonville, is not going to get an offer from the Jaguars. He is a local Aurora kid, so from near Denver kid, I shouldn't say kid. He's an old man these days, but a very large man and a very, very good player who has gotten better with age for whatever reason. Good dude, really good off the field man. Local, I think he could be a really great story here in Denver. Local guy that I think still has a year or two left in his body to really provide good play at the defensive tackle position. Otherwise, Skipper covers really well the guys who are available. Now, I'm not sure who that was sourced by, so I'm not even positive it was correct. I didn't spend time to look it up, honestly, but I did see that, and it made me automatically interested because I love local stories, and he is definitely one of the best in the NFL from Denver. He actually went to school just down the street from where I lived for 4 or 5 years, so Calais Campbell has always been a guy that I've watched and rooted for. Even though he never played for the Broncos. Almost did back in, I believe, 2015, 2016. He almost came to Denver and instead chose Jacksonville. Anyway, what else is in the news? As I mentioned in my mini pod earlier this week, Drew Lock and Peyton Manning met up at a Nuggets game, had a nice little chat. Drew Lock introduced his girlfriend to Peyton Manning, and the two kind of continued their friendship. Not the girlfriend and Drew Lock, but Drew Lock and Peyton Manning. And again, as I said in the mini pod, I think it's just such a good sign of things that Peyton Manning has a relationship with him. He has a relationship with the Broncos, and this is one of the smartest quarterbacks of all time. To have him as your mentor, it's just pure gravy. And I think, as a fan, I couldn't be happier to have that guy coaching up our guy. And it's just really, it's one of those things that points towards there's just this momentum of optimism in the Broncos country. You can feel it. You feel it from the fans. You feel it from the scouts and the pundits and the coaches and the players. Now, not all of them. Chris Harris Jr. is kind of, slamming the door on his way out, I think, in a way. But a lot of guys, I think, are starting to feel they could have something special brewing here in Denver. Now, obviously, that all relies on Drew Lock, as it always does with the quarterback, but things are really moving in the right direction. Now, the key is you have to find that perfect mix, that perfect locker room feel. Now, the Patriots have done it for years and years just by being this perfectly run business. I don't think there's a lot of friendships. It's just business. They get there, they do their jobs, and they do it really, really well, better than anybody else. And that's how they've won, and that's how they've won for 20 years. Now, other teams, I think like the Philadelphia Eagles are a perfect example. They went in, and they were not the most talented team at all, but they just had it. They had the ball bounced their way. They had this feeling that they were not going to be stopped. I think it was like the Denver Broncos in 2015. They had obviously a very, very talented defense, but not a whole lot going on offense. And I think that they had this feel in that locker room. And yeah, the ball bounced their way a few times. But I think that the Broncos, if they can find that, if they can find this special recipe of what a locker room needs with veteran leadership and young kids come in who want to learn and want to ball out, and you have these kids who who are growing from being in their rookie contracts and going into their second and third years and taking on more responsibilities, like Cortland Sutton, like Phillip Lindsay, like Dalton Reisner. These are guys who can help be the faces of this franchise. And I think that the Broncos, as far as I can see, have a perfect mix of that right now. Now, I'm not in that locker room. I don't know what all is being said, what all is going on. But you have Von Miller, who I have questioned his leadership in the past, but I think he's starting to really, really grow into it. I think Derek Wolfe also is a very vocal leader. At times, at least, I think he's vocal on the field. I don't know if off the field he's necessarily vocal. But then, on offense, you don't really have any of these aged veterans since Emmanuel Sanders left, though most people would say that's probably a good thing. But you do have Phillip Lindsay, Dalton Reisner, and Cortland Sutton, who are all these younger guys who are stepping into that next role. And I think they're going to be absolutely perfect in that role, just perfect. I think they're such a great group to bring that next level of commitment and energy and smarts. And I love that about all three of these guys, that they just have this intelligence and they have this passion for the game of football that you can't always find. You can't always find that in players, and they all three have it on the offensive side of the ball. Now, I think you find that on defense with Justin Simmons, and I'm sure some other guys. He's the guy who really sticks out to me, who really has it. But really, you're going to see a very different defense. Obviously, a lot of guys leaving, a very big change on defense, and I'm curious to see who comes in and takes over that mantle as leaders. Is it Joe Scovert coming in from Cleveland? Is it Is it Calais Campbell? I mean, heck, that's one reason I would love for Calais Campbell to come. I think he's a leader on the field. He's a leader off the field. Again, an extremely good guy, and that's what you need. You need that. You need that presence that, those people who can come in and lead your young guys. You need young guys who come in and are in it to win it, and that's not a given. I mean, you hear these stories about Dwayne Haskins with Washington. Now, these are rumors. I don't think these are confirmed. But there are a lot of rumors going around that he just didn't really care. He didn't put in the work. He didn't really have the right attitude. And that's a bummer. I actually thought he would be the best quarterback coming out of that draft. And, hey, if you don't have the attitude, then it's not going to work. Look at Paxton Lynch. Again, yes, just rumors. But the guy had all the skills. He had all the talent. Obviously, he went high in the first round. But he didn't have the brain. He didn't have the mentality. And everything I've seen about Drew Lock shows me he does have the mentality. He does want to be everything he possibly can be. He does have a chip on the shoulder. He wants to be the best player in the game. And that's not a given. It's just not. And a guy who's going out of his way to talk to Peyton Manning, to ask everyone advice, to find out the best way to run an off-season, when to work out with his wide receivers, when to do this, when to do that. And I think he's going to do it. And to be able to take that offense into his hands in his second season, really his first full season, I can't wait to see it. I cannot wait to see it. To have this young quarterback leading a mostly young group of guys with a few elderly statesmen there to lead the way and say things when they need to. A veteran coaching staff, at least in age, if not experience. Guys, I know I kind of repeat myself each week, but each week there's one more piece, right? This week it's A.J. Bouye. And it's just a good fit. It's a good sign. He's affordable. He's talented. He should work in the system. I mean, best case, he's your number 2 cornerback. Worst case, he's your number 1 cornerback. And you know what? That's okay. There's rumors they might go out and get Prince Amukamara. So you really have kind of 2 high-end number 2 cornerbacks. And, I mean, in Vic Fangio's scheme, I think that works. You need guys who are willing to go up and make tackles and play to a very good, but I guess you could say solid and I don't know what the word is, but a scheme that's not overly complicated most of the time. And I think you need playmakers, especially up the middle of the field, which I think is why they go out and get Scobert, why they have Justin Simmons, who knows who else they bring in, Calais Campbell, whoever up the middle. Anyway, I think this team is that each step they make, it just makes me more and more excited. I cannot wait for the season to begin. I can't wait. I know that's a long way away. I should be able to wait for that. But for free agency, for the draft, there's so much going on, and it's just I can't wait. Broncos fans, that's all I've got for you. Skipper Dude, up next, he'll finish off the show. As again, I'm sorry, it's a little bit of a truncated show this week, but we'll be back next week. I think hopefully next week the work and the baby will have, everything will have settled down a little bit, and I'll be able to put on a little bit longer of a podcast with a little more information. As we see, this is the time of year where information is going like crazy. Tons of things are going to be happening, and please like this video, subscribe on YouTube. We have once a week, always Broncos and Bratwurst podcast, but each day, or at least every other day, we're going out with mini pods about news around, especially around the Broncos, but also around the NFL, covering the new CBA rules or big free agents. I talked a little bit about Tom Brady. If I want to bash on Aaron Rodgers, then I'll do that too. Anything we want to talk about. So please subscribe, hit that bell so you get any notifications that when we publish something, which again is much more frequently than it used to be. We'll see you guys next week. Go Broncos. Skipper Dude, up next.
And this time I know it's real. The feelings that I feel. I know if I put my mind to it, I know that I really could do it. But it's gonna take a money. A whole lot of spending money. It's gonna take plenty of money to do it right, child.
Thanks as always, Kevin. That's right, Broncos country. It's going to take a whole lot of spending money and time and patience, but I'm convinced we can do this thing and make the Denver Broncos great again. So, with the meat of this year's offseason ready to roll out over the next 6 to 8 weeks, I wanted to take a very strategic look at how I think John Elway is going to evolve this team from the one that was very close to winning a lot of games in 2019 to one that is going to win a lot of games in 2020 and go deep into the playoffs. And yes, you heard me right. Assuming even a decent next 2 months, I believe the Broncos are poised to not only get to the playoffs this year, but also to win a playoff game or two as well. Now, there was a time in the NFL, most especially the 70s and 80s in my earliest days as a fan, when building a team was just a matter of accumulating as much talent as you could. You didn't have free agency until 1993, or massive salaries, or more importantly, a salary cap. So once you developed a great nucleus of players like the Dolphins and Steelers in the 1970s, or then the Cowboys and 49ers in the 1980s, those teams mostly had the luxury of being able to ride out their dynasties in a way that teams today just can't match. Today, though, building an NFL team is a very different art form. You have to pick your battles. You simply cannot afford to have elite talent at every position or to be elite in every position group. The salary cap and college draft dictate that you need to have vision and figure out where your specific vision requires that your team be elite and where you can afford to be just average. And the teams that are successful in today's NFL are the ones who figure out how best to match their talent to that vision. Typically, a great team will have, like Kevin likes to say all the time, either a solid, cheap, young quarterback or a legendary older quarterback. But in addition, great teams will often do one or maybe two things freakishly well, like Brady and Belichick and McDaniels and that blasted outlet receiver who always seemed to be wide open in the middle of the field during the Patriots' heyday. And then they make do with mostly average talent throughout the rest of the team. So, with that in mind, today I wanted to take a deepish dive into the John Elway, Vic Fangio vision for the Denver Broncos, and specifically the men who are going to dictate where John Elway needs to focus the salary cap and draft capital this offseason, and perhaps even more importantly, where he can afford to build position groups that are cheap and functional, but still help toward building a championship team. Now, my thinking is that there are three men who are going to dictate the personnel needs of this team over the next several seasons. On defense, of course, it will be Vic Fangio himself. On offense, it'll be Drew Lock and to a lesser extent, Pat Shurmur, who are going to dictate the Broncos' talent needs over the next several years at a minimum. I started preparing for this segment wanting to discuss the impact of Fangio and Locke and Shurmur in depth, but I ended up with so much material that I'm going to end up breaking this into two segments. So today, I'm going to discuss Fangio and the defense, and next week, I'll take a look at Locke, Shurmur, and the offense. So on defense, one thing I've said in the past that in my estimation defines Vic Fangio's defense is that he wants to build his defense from the inside out. I believe he wants his premier defensive talent in the middle of the field so that he can own the middle of the field and force teams to beat him on the sidelines. So the ideal Fangio defense, I believe, begins with the nose tackle, and I've really come to believe that a special Fangio defense will have a special player at nose tackle, a guy who can play a one tech on the center shoulder and have both the agility to shoot through the center gap as a one gap defensive lineman, but also the strength to hold the line of scrimmage by reading and reacting as a two-gap tackle, especially on running plays. This past season, Fangio may have thought he had his guy in Shelby Harris, but as we saw over the first couple of games, Shelby had a very nice one-gap agility to be a Fangio nose tackle, but not the two-gap strength, and teams just ran right over him, especially the Bears in week 2, if you remember. Fangio, of course, switched over to Mike Purcell, and Purcell stopped the bleeding in the run game, but he still really wasn't that two into a Fangio 1-gap and 2-gap special kind of nose tackle. So I'm rather guessing that Fangio will not only be looking to upgrade at nose tackle, but will be looking to make that his number one target for the offseason. Give Vic Fangio a special nose tackle, and he will make some amazing things happen with this defense. Now, many of us in Broncos country, including yours truly, have been dreaming about the Chiefs' Chris Jones in orange and blue. But of course, the Chiefs slapped the franchise tag on Jones last week, so unfortunately, that ain't going to happen. I don't see how the Chiefs are going to make it work from a salary cap perspective, honestly, but that's a discussion for another day. But the good news here is that John Elway is on record as saying he believes that defensive line is one of the better free agent groups this year, and actually looking at it, there's a good deal of young talent on that board, and judging solely by the fact that Shelby Harris is number 12 in Walter Football's rankings of defensive tackle free agents after removing Chris Jones, and there's clearly some talent from which to choose. What really stands out, though, to me at least, is the youth of this free agent group. Of the 11 defensive linemen ranked ahead of Shelby Harris in Walter Football's list, only 2 are older than 27. Michael Brockers is 29, and Ndamukong Suh is 33. So a heavy sigh, Chris Jones is off the board, but there are going to be a number of other solid options available. One other option might be to go defensive line in the first round of next month's draft, with either Derek Brown from Auburn, a guy who looks like Ndamukong Suh in his prime on tape, but didn't really perform that well at the Combine, as well as Javon Kinlaw, the 6'6" rags to riches story from South Carolina. Kinlaw is a guy whose story is a little like Michael Orr from The Blind Side, and he will win the hearts of every fan of the team that drafts him in April. If you have a few minutes, go to YouTube and look up Javon Kinlaw Combine interview. It will leave you in tears. The issue with Kinlaw, though, is that he has a balky knee, and that could cause him to fall to 15 or so in the draft. At one time, I was ready to promote John Elway trading up as high as the 8th pick to get Brown. But with Brown's stock dropping after the Combine, I doubt that I see him falling to the Broncos at 15. But still, perhaps if he's there at 10 or 11 and the Browns or the Jets are content slipping to 15, you offer a third rounder and change to get him. By the way, as a total aside, how utterly weird would it be if the Browns end up with Derek Brown in the first round of in April and offensive lineman Ezra Cleveland in the second? I'll bet that's never happened before, but I digress. You have to remember with young stud defensive linemen that they're still 4 or 5 years away from peak physical maturity, and they're learning a ton of new concepts in the NFL. And with what Fangio asked from his nose tackle, you wouldn't expect a rookie nose tackle to be a game wrecker in his first year. But enough on nose tackles. You get the idea that that's probably going to be a Fangio priority this offseason. Fangio uses his defensive ends in a pretty typical way, and I think you'll start your 2020 defensive ends with Dre'Mont Jones and in all likelihood Derek Wolfe plus DeMarcus Walker for depth. Yeah, it needs work. I'd love to see Shelby Harris back, but I think he's as good as gone. But really, the rest of Fangio's inside-out approach looks fantastic right now. Alexander Johnson looked great at inside linebacker, and Justin Simmons and Kareem Jackson are one of the best safety pairs in the NFL. And I'm also foreseeing Justin Hollins playing a role next year as a sort of outside-inside linebacker hybrid. Perhaps he can become the Broncos' long-anticipated tight end slayer, a guy who can finally slow down Travis Kelce. So you're pretty set there in the middle of the field, although one more big-time middle-of-the-field guy might be worth exploring. Joe Schobert from the Browns is a name I like as an additional stud, as well as Isaiah Simmons, the rookie from Clemson, should he fall to the 15th pick, which is doubtful. He's another freakishly good athlete. I think either one of them would make this position group at least borderline freakishly talented, just like Fangio's going to like it. But honestly, my one issue here is that outside of injuries, if you add a guy like Schobert, you're going to have a hard time getting Justin Hollins on the field. I know I'm super high on Justin Hollins headed into 2020, and I think if it's at a hybrid type of position, you need to get him on the field. At outside linebacker, the Broncos are already stacked, so you won't see anything done there, but they're very thin at cornerback. After having non-tendered Devontae Bosby and traded for A.J. Bouye earlier this week, things aren't in bad shape, but really neither Callahan nor Bouye is probably a genuine number one corner, although the 2017 version of Bouye is probably close. And there's at least speculation that Prince Amukamara, another decent cornerback 2 type, might be interested in signing with the Broncos to join his old coach Vic Fangio after having been cut by the Bears. The knock on Bouye is that his play really fell off in 2019, but he's only 28 years old, and his rough 2019 may very well have been a reflection of the Jags falling off badly as a defense overall, as well as the loss of Jalen Ramsey. If you remember, Justin Simmons was fairly bad in 2018 under Joe Woods as his defensive coordinator, but he became arguably the NFL's best safety in 2019 under Ed Donatel. A good defensive back in a bad system is going to be a bad player. So I know I have some hope of Bouye returning to excellence in Denver. So without a legitimate number one, I know much of Broncos country is looking to fetch a legitimate number one cornerback this offseason. And guys, I'm going to make a very bold prediction here, and may very well be wrong, but I'm going to throw some cold water on everybody and say that that just isn't going to happen. This free agent cornerback market is absolutely atrocious. The general consensus is Byron Jones, who is everybody's darling and a truly elite cornerback, I mean truly elite, is the number one free agent. And James Bradbury from Carolina is number 2. Fair enough. But Bradbury may very well get hit with a franchise tag in Carolina and get taken off the market. So then look at the next few names out at Walter Football. Number 3 is Chris Harris Jr. Number 5 is Bradley Roby. And number 6, the Ravens' soon-to-be 32-year-old Jimmy Smith. So this is a very, very thin market. What does that mean? Well, for starters, I don't see Byron Jones being a realistic option because he's realistically the only elite cornerback on the market. Somebody is going to sign him for a stupid amount of money. And I think your Byron Jones enthusiasts out there are going to be left scratching their heads and saying, okay, I wanted the guy, but not that much. The sophisticated Broncos fan base seems ready to pay the guy $17 million a year, which is a full $2 million up from Xavier Howard with the Dolphins, but I'm not even sure that's going to get it done because Byron Jones is going to be calling all the shots. He may end up literally being the only game in town. He can name his price. And I think the same is going to go for Darius Slay from the Lions. He may be the other true plum of the current crop of available NFL cornerbacks, but I'm foreseeing the Lions standing firm and wanting a second-round pick. And to make matters worse, Slay is entering the last year of a 4-year contract, and he's going to want big money starting in 2021. In the Fangio view of the world, I just don't see him wanting to spend those types of resources on a headliner of a cornerback. I just don't. Now, let me give you a little analogy from history. Do any of you remember the old Barry Bonds, Jeff Kent, San Francisco Giants from the late 90s and early 2000s? This was still before the Tim Lincecum days and was a team that had a ton of success, not only without a legitimate number one pitcher, but realistically, they didn't even have a legitimate number 2 pitcher. So every day, they would throw out a number 3 starter type of a guy, like a Russ Ortiz or Levon Hernandez or Sean Estes or Kirk Reuter, but it was an extremely successful formula to the point where they dominated the Western Division for a number of years and made the World Series in 2002. This is kind of how I see Vic Fangio building his cornerback room, with a bunch of guys who are ballers like Devontae Bosby, but without the top-end talent of a Byron Jones or a Darius Slay. There's certainly not going to be anything like the no-fly zone with Aqib Talib and Chris Harris in their primes. So, there you have it, the official Skipper Dude roadmap for the upcoming season. I'm assuming we're going to re-sign Justin Simmons because, well, we will. There's no question about that. But beyond that, I'm convinced Fangio is going to be jonesing for a top-end nose tackle, building depth on the defensive line, perhaps bringing in another inside linebacker or hybrid inside linebacker safety to pair with Alexander Johnson, and then making do with some solid but functional cornerbacks. I don't don't think the 2020 Broncos defense will be the best defense Vic Fangio will ever have in Denver, nor will it be anything close to the 2015 Broncos, but I do believe it'll be a healthy step up from the 2019 defense, which was really a pretty decent defense overall. And I think that gives us fans something to be excited about. So next week, I'll talk about the offense and specifically where John Elway needs to focus his free agent and draft capital in light of a shiny new quarterback in Drew Lock and an aggressive and proven offensive play caller in Pat Shurmur. Quick spoiler alert, I believe the offense is still a little ways from being great, but it's actually a good deal closer than the defense.